They threaten to arrest farmers, British farmers, people who wake up at 5 in the morning, every single day, to feed this country. And Starmer's response to that was arrest them, not reverse the tax, not sit down and talk, not admit they got it wrong, arrest them. So I'm done writing columns, done giving warnings, done being polite about it, because polite isn't working.
A standoff is growing in Britain and tractors on the roads, fields turning into protest grounds and farmers refusing to step back. The tension is rising, the pressure is building. And the whole country is watching what happens next. Why are farmers saying they will not move? Why is Keir Starmer facing growing pressure? And why has Jeremy Clarkson stepped forward with a strong warning? As this crisis grows, the future of farming, food prices and the economy of the United Kingdom could all be at risk. Britain is holding its breath. And this story is only just beginning. Right now, across different parts of the United Kingdom, farmers are taking a stand. They are bringing tractors onto major roads, gathering in large numbers and showing clear anger over government policies that they believe threaten their survival. This is not a small protest or a short-term reaction. Farmers say this is about their future, their land and their ability to keep producing food for the nation. Many of them say they have reached a breaking point after years of rising pressure on their industry. The heart of the issue is simple but serious. Farmers say the cost of running their farms has increased sharply. Fuel prices are high. Animal feed costs more than before. Fertiliser prices have jumped. Machinery and equipment are becoming expensive to maintain. At the same time, many farmers say the money they earn from selling their products has not increased enough to match these rising costs. This gap between income and expenses is creating deep financial stress. Some farmers warn that if the situation continues, many farms could shut down completely. Another major concern is government policy. Farmers believe that certain rules and changes are making their work harder instead of helping them. They say environmental regulations, tax concerns, and changes in support programs are adding pressure rather than offering solutions. While the government argues that reforms are needed for long-term sustainability and economic stability, many farmers feel their voices are not being heard. They believe decisions are being made without fully understanding the realities of farming life. For many farming families, this is not just about business, it is about tradition and identity. Farming in Britain has often been passed down from generation to generation. Families who have worked the same land for decades now fear they may not be able to continue. This emotional connection to the land has made the protest even stronger. Farmers say they are not just protecting income, they are protecting a way of life. Scenes from the protests show long lines of tractors blocking roads, farmers holding signs and large gatherings in rural areas. These images are spreading quickly across social media and news channels. The message from protesters is clear: they will not move until their concerns are taken seriously. Some farmers say they are prepared for a long struggle if necessary. Their determination is turning this issue into a national conversation. The protests are also gaining support from parts of the public. Some citizens believe farmers are fighting for fair treatment and for the country's food security. Others worry about the possible effects of the protests, such as disruption to transport, rising food prices, and economic uncertainty. This mixed reaction shows how complex the situation has become. At the centre of this growing tension is the question of food security. Farmers play a critical role in keeping supermarkets supplied and ensuring stable food production. If farming becomes unprofitable or unstable, experts warn it could affect supply chains and increase dependence on imported food. This possibility has added urgency to the crisis, making the issue important not just for rural communities, but for every household. The situation has now reached a point where the protests are no longer just about farming. They are becoming a national, political and economic challenge. As farmers continue their demonstrations and refuse to step back, pressure is building on leaders to respond quickly and effectively. The longer the standoff continues, the greater the impact could be on the country's economy and stability. What started as frustration over costs and policies has now grown into a powerful movement demanding change. Farmers say they are standing firm because they believe their future depends on it. The question now is whether the government will respond with compromise or whether the confrontation will continue to grow. And as this tension spreads across the country, one thing is clear. The standoff between farmers and leadership is far from over, and the next steps could shape the future of British farming for years to come. As the protests continue to grow, the pressure is now falling directly on the government, and especially on Keir Starmer. What began as a protest by farmers is quickly turning into a serious political test for his leadership. Every day the demonstrations continue, the situation becomes harder to control, and the questions facing the government become more urgent. The biggest challenge for Starmer is balancing two difficult realities. On one side, farmers are demanding immediate action to reduce their financial burden and protect their future. On the other side, the government says it must focus on long-term economic stability, environmental goals, and national policy reforms. This clash between urgent demands and long-term planning is creating a tense political situation. Critics say the government reacted too slowly when farmers first raised concerns. Many farming groups claim they tried to warn officials about rising costs and growing difficulties long before the protests began. They say their warnings were ignored, which forced them to take stronger action. Now, opposition voices are using the crisis to question the government's leadership and decision-making. Political opponents argue that the situation shows a disconnect between policymakers and rural communities. They claim leaders in power do not fully understand the daily struggles faced by farmers. These accusations are gaining attention, especially as images of large protests spread across news channels and social media. For Starmer, this creates not just a policy problem, but also a public trust issue. Inside the government, there is growing concern about how the protests could affect public opinion. Farmers are often seen as essential workers who provide food for the nation. Because of this, many citizens feel sympathy for their struggle. If public support continues to shift toward the protesters, the government could face increasing pressure to make concessions. Another concern is the economic impact. A prolonged standoff could disrupt supply chains, transport systems, and food production. If the crisis leads to higher food prices or shortages, public frustration could grow rapidly. Economic uncertainty often creates political risk, and leaders must respond carefully to avoid wider instability. At the same time, the government must also consider its broader policy goals. Officials argue that reforms in agriculture, environmental protection, and taxation are necessary for the country's future. They say change is needed to create a more sustainable and efficient system. However, farmers argue that these changes are happening too quickly and without enough support. This disagreement has created a deep divide. The crisis is also attracting attention across the United Kingdom, with leaders from different regions expressing concern about the growing tension. Some local officials are calling for dialogue and negotiation, warning that the situation could escalate if no solution is found soon. They stress the importance of communication between farmers and government representatives to prevent further conflict. Adding to the pressure is the voice of public figures who have entered the debates. Among them is Jeremy Clarkson, who has spoken strongly about the struggles faced by farmers. His comments have brought even more attention to the issue, increasing public discussion and putting additional focus on government actions. When influential voices support protesters, it often strengthens their position and raises expectations for change. For Starmer, the stakes are high. If the government fails to resolve the crisis, it could damage confidence in his leadership. Political analysts warn that how he handles this situation may shape public opinion for years. A strong response could restore trust, but a weak or delayed reaction could increase criticism and deepen divisions. Behind closed doors, discussions are likely taking place about possible solutions. These could include financial support measures, policy adjustments, or negotiations with farming leaders. However, reaching a compromise is not simple. Any decision must balance economic limits, environmental commitments, and public expectations. Meanwhile, farmers continue to hold their ground. Their refusal to step back means the government cannot ignore the issue. Every protest, every road blockade, and every public statement adds to the pressure building around the leadership. This is no longer just about agriculture. It is about authority, public confidence and political survival. The crisis is testing the government's ability to respond to national challenges and manage growing public anger. As the standoff continues, the question becomes more urgent. Will the government change its approach, or will the confrontation grow even stronger? The answer could shape the political future of the country and determine whether this crisis becomes a turning point for leadership in Britain. The growing crisis has now taken a new turn, and it comes from an unexpected but powerful voice. One of Britain's most well-known public figures has stepped into the debate, bringing even more attention to the farmers' struggle. His message is simple but serious: ignore farmers now, and the consequences could affect the entire nation. Jeremy Clarkson has openly spoken in support of farmers, warning that the situation is more dangerous than many people realise. Known for his direct and often controversial opinions, Clarkson has used his public platform to highlight the pressure farmers are facing. His statements have quickly spread across media and online discussions, turning the farming protest into an even bigger national issue. Clarkson's connection to farming is not new. Through his show, Clarkson's Farm, he shared his personal experience of running a farm and showed viewers the real challenges behind agricultural work. The programme, streamed on Amazon Prime Video, introduced millions of people to the daily struggles farmers face, from unpredictable weather and strict regulations to financial risks and heavy workloads. Because of this experience, many people see his views on farming as informed and relatable. In his recent comments, Clarkson warned that farmers are being pushed too far. He argued that rising costs, strict policies and lack of support are creating conditions where farming may no longer be sustainable for many families. According to him, if farms begin to disappear, the country could face serious problems with food production and rural economic stability. His warning focuses on a simple idea: farming is essential for national survival. Without farmers producing food locally, the country may have to depend more on imports. This could lead to higher food prices, supply problems and greater economic risk. Clarkson's message suggests that what is happening now is not just a dispute between farmers and the government, but a warning sign about the future. Because Clarkson has a large audience and strong public influence, his support has given farmers more visibility. His statements have helped bring the issue into everyday conversations, reaching people who may not normally follow agricultural news. Many viewers who watched his farming series already understand the pressures he describes, which makes his message even more powerful. However, his involvement has also created debate. Some critics argue that celebrities should not influence complex political matters. Others believe his experience gives him the right to speak out. This disagreement has only increased public interest, keeping the issue in the spotlight and adding more pressure on decision makers. Media coverage of Clarkson's warning has further expanded the discussion. News outlets, commentators and public figures are now talking openly about the future of farming and the government's response. The situation is no longer limited to rural communities. It has become a national conversation about food security, economic stability and political responsibility. For farmers, support from a high-profile figure provides encouragement and strength. Many protesters say that public recognition of their struggle helps them continue their movement. When influential voices speak in their favour, it increases pressure on leaders to respond and makes it harder to ignore their demands. Clarkson's warning also highlights a deeper concern: the gap between policy decisions and real-world impact. His message suggests that those who create rules must better understand how those rules affect everyday workers. This idea is gaining support among people who believe the current system needs change. As his voice continues to influence public opinion, the crisis is becoming more intense. The involvement of powerful personalities means the debate is no longer just about policy details. It is about national priorities and the direction of the country's future. And as more attention gathers around the farmers' protest, one question continues to grow louder: if the warnings are ignored, what consequences could follow? The answer may affect not only farmers, but every household that depends on stable food and economic security. The farmers' protest is no longer just a dispute between one group and the government. It is becoming a national concern that could affect millions of people. As the standoff continues, experts and citizens are beginning to worry about the wider impact on the economy, food supply, and everyday life across the United Kingdom. One of the biggest fears is the effect on food prices. Farmers play a central role in producing the food that reaches supermarkets and homes every day. If farming becomes too costly or difficult to continue, production may slow down. When supply decreases and demand stays the same, prices usually rise. This means basic items such as vegetables, dairy products, and meat could become more expensive for ordinary families. For many households already dealing with rising living costs, even a small increase in food prices can create serious pressure. Families may need to reduce spending, change buying habits, or struggle to manage their monthly expenses. This possibility is causing concern among consumers who worry about their financial stability. Beyond prices, there is also concern about food supply itself. If protests continue to disrupt transport routes or slow down production, supermarkets could face shortages of certain products. Empty shelves or limited availability could create panic buying and further instability in the market. Even the fear of shortages can sometimes cause sudden changes in consumer behaviour. The impact is not limited to consumers. Businesses that depend on agricultural products, such as food manufacturers, restaurants and retailers, could also face challenges. If supply becomes uncertain, companies may struggle to maintain normal operations. This could affect jobs, business growth, and overall economic activity. Transport and logistics systems are another area of concern. Farmers using tractors to block major roads and highways can slow down deliveries and create delays. These disruptions affect not only food distribution, but also other industries that rely on efficient transport networks. When supply chains are interrupted, the effects often spread quickly across the economy. Rural communities are feeling the pressure most directly. Farming supports many local businesses, from equipment suppliers to small shops and service providers. If farms struggle financially or close down, entire local economies could weaken. This could lead to job losses and long-term economic decline in rural areas. The crisis is also raising questions about national food security. Producing food locally helps a country remain stable during global disruptions. If domestic farming declines, the nation may become more dependent on imported food. While imports can provide support, they also bring risks such as higher costs, global price changes, and supply uncertainty during international crises. Public anxiety is growing as people watch the situation develop. News coverage, social media discussions, and public debates are increasing awareness of the crisis. Many citizens are asking how long the protests will continue and what solutions may be offered. The sense of uncertainty is creating tension across the country. Economic experts warn that prolonged instability in agriculture can have long-term consequences. Farming is the foundation of national stability, and problems within this sector can influence inflation, employment, and economic growth. If the crisis continues without resolution, its impact could be felt for years. At the same time, there is also growing pressure for dialogue and compromise. Many citizens believe a solution must be found quickly to prevent further disruption. Calls for negotiation between farmers and government leaders are becoming louder as people hope to avoid a deeper crisis. For now, the nation watches and waits. The protests continue, the pressure builds, and uncertainty remains about what will happen next. What began as a dispute over costs and policy has grown into a situation that could shape the country's economic future. As Britain faces this moment of tension, one thing is clear: the outcome of this standoff will not only decide the future of farming, but could also affect the daily lives of millions. The question remains, will a solution come in time, or will the crisis grow even deeper?